AI just crossed a line. People with no coding skills can now build real software from scratch.
I've built 15 projects in 3 months without writing a single line of code.
Not many people knew how to make software, but for the first time, you don't need that.
Agents able to reason, take tasks, and actually do work.
But the world is pushing back.
It's time to build communities, not data centers.
Super Bowl 60 will go down in history as having the worst commercials of all time. Because why the do we get 9,000 ads for AI?
And here we are, Jim. We're in another SaaS apocalypse.
And the companies that promise to govern themselves, they're abandoning their own safety pledges. The Pentagon is threatening to blacklist the last one holding the line.
For all the differences I have with Anthropic, I mostly trust them as a company, and I think they really do care about safety. I'm not sure where this is going to go.
This is moving very, very quickly. I still think there's a lot of great steps that we can and should take right now, but absolutely, we are running out of time.
I'm Deirdre Bosa with The Take. AI just leveled up, and the safety nets are coming off. If you blink, you missed it. In the first 2 months of 2026, AI went from a chatbot that's helpful with writing and research to an entire executive assistant, one that can take over your computer to complete hours-long tasks, read and answer emails, book travel, all reliably, accurately, and quickly.
What's happening is that AI just went through its third inflection. The first one was 2 years ago with ChatGPT. And then the second one was about a year ago when the reasoning AI agents came out. And then now, with these agentic systems, we're now having these agents able to reason, take tasks, and actually do work.
A level of capability that had only been promised, and that for some, one that wasn't supposed to arrive for years. Let me show you. I asked an AI agent to do something every office worker in America has lost a Sunday night to. Make a PowerPoint. The prompt, make me a 10-slide deck on AI agents in 2026. What changed, what they can do, why it matters. Make it visually polished, executive level. The AI took over my computer. It researched, wrote headlines, bullet points, built the layouts. I did not touch anything. The result, 10 slides, structured, polished, done. Then I pushed it, second prompt, asking to make it super visual with an ominous theme and Terminator energy. It reworked the entire deck, from the colors to the headlines to the tone that pokes fun at some real fears. All this took was 2 prompts, and that's the leap. This isn't a chatbot answering questions, it's an agent doing work.
People have ideas in their heads that could be valuable business, that could be really impactful projects, could be social impact, whatever it is. But everyone has ideas, and until today, they couldn't really get it out into the world. And now that's the big inflection point.
And it's not just me. Lawyers are using agents to build entire cases, marketers to launch full campaigns. People who have never written a line of code are building software, websites, apps, doing in an afternoon what used to take a team of engineers weeks.
A young person who just said, look, let me tell you what I've been doing with Cursor and Anthropic. And I said, well, that would take years. He said, no, I did it 4 days.
It's impressive and a little unsettling. And right now, there's no stopping it. A Pew survey found that Americans are now more concerned than excited about AI in their daily lives, but they're still using it. ChatGPT now has over 800 million weekly users, and that number is growing. You could see the tension play out in real time at the Super Bowl. Nearly a quarter of all commercials featured AI. It didn't just show up to the biggest stage in advertising, it took over. And according to one analysis, the AI commercials drew outsized criticism. Half of mentions were negative. But it didn't matter. AI was already in their living rooms. The tension isn't just cultural, it's financial, and the sell-off has been indiscriminate.
Sassacre.
Software continues to get crushed.
Gaming stocks, Unity Software, Roblox, and Take-Two plunging today after Alphabet rolled out its latest tool to Google AI Ultra subscribers.
Legal services we've seen just get absolutely crushed.
Brokerages are the latest victims.
The trucking stocks were sell first, ask questions later.
The cyber sector, mostly lower following a big tumble.
The IGV software ETF dropped nearly 30% in the first 2 months of the year. It hit gaming, legal, insurance, trucking, cybersecurity. The carnage was indiscriminate. The same technology that was supposed to save software companies is now what is threatening to kill them. And here's what's accelerating the damage. AI isn't just getting smarter, it's getting connected. Companies are racing to plug AI agents directly into systems through open integrations with no standard governing what the AI can access or what it can do. The same agents I showed you making PowerPoints, they're now inside enterprise software, doing the work those companies used to charge for. Nobody knows how to value something this big, moving this fast, with no rules around it. And Washington can't figure out how to govern it. The backlash isn't just cultural or financial, it's becoming political, and one race tells the whole story. Meet Alex Boras.
This feels different than the internet or even social media, which were launched with great optimism. AI could similarly bring massive, massive benefits. But I think it's maybe a third time a charm where people are saying, wait, we also know there are risks here and we want to get ahead of that.
He has a master's in computer science and he used to work at Palantir. He got elected to the New York State Assembly and wrote the RAISE Act, the first major AI safety law in the country. He's now running for Congress and his race has become ground zero for the biggest question in tech. Who gets to decide what AI can and cannot do? For that, he's now facing a $125 million super PAC out to end his career.
They've made clear they want to make an example here, that if they win this race, they're going to go to every member of Congress and say, don't you dare regulate AI, otherwise we'll spend $10 million against you.
Right now, there's no federal law governing AI, there's no national standard, and there's no agency.
If what they actually wanted was a national framework, they'd be supporting me, not spending $10 million against me.
The PAC is called Leading the Future. It's backed by OpenAI co-founder Greg Brockman, Andreessen Horowitz, and Palantir's Joe Lonsdale. Their argument, regulation will hand the lead to China. Boras sees it differently.
I love this argument because it's very rarely done in good faith. And the example of that is you ask these people what they feel about export controls. And the vast majority of them are against it, in which case you're not really being serious about the race against China.
His argument is simple. You can be pro-innovation and still demand guardrails.
Putting a seatbelt on a Lamborghini doesn't really slow down the Lamborghini, but it saves lots of lives.
But he also knows he's running out of time.
I think the reason Leading the Future is willing to spend so much in this election cycle is they know they only have to push it off for a few years before one of the companies gets to AGI, maybe gets to a place where they're so powerful they can't be regulated at all. This is moving very, very quickly. I still think there's a lot of great steps that we can and should take right now, but absolutely we are running out of time.
Boras said the companies voluntarily committed to safety, but he warned they'd drop those commitments that their competitors did first. And that's exactly what's happening. The people building this technology, they're sounding the alarms too. This year, the head of Anthropic Safeguard's research team quit. His resignation letter said the world is in peril. He described the pressure of watching his company weigh its safety values against the race to compete. Days later, an OpenAI researcher resigned and wrote a New York Times op-ed titled, "OpenAI is making the same mistakes Facebook made," warning that ChatGPT's trove of user data, from medical fears to relationship problems, is now being monetized through advertising.
I've seen videos online. Well, remember Sam Altman said we'd only go to selling ads as a last resort. Now, of course, they're planning on doing that.
Another OpenAI employee wrote simply, "I finally feel the existential threat that AI is posing." And then there's the company that was supposed to be the counterweight, the one that took the side of safety while everyone else lined up against it. Anthropic. Its CEO, Dario Amodei, founded the company because he thought OpenAI was moving too fast. It built its reputation and its valuation on the promise that it would do this responsibly.
Things are going too fast and we are not yet prepared. And you know, we need to ramp up, for all that. Every time we release a model, we have, 200 pages of analysis of these various stress tests that you mentioned, where we put the model in extreme situations, and see if it lies, if it blackmails, if it tries to gain power. 200
pages of stress tests. And still, Anthropic has published research showing that its own AI can now assist in the creation of chemical weapons. OpenAI found its latest model can help plan biological threats. So what is Anthropic doing? Well, it scrapped the core safety pledge it was founded on. It's replacing hard safety commitments with what it calls non-binding, publicly declared targets, because otherwise, it says, competitors could race ahead. Meanwhile, Anthropic is embroiled in a public, high-stakes showdown with the Pentagon. The military wants Anthropic to remove guardrails around its model after the company refused to allow it to be used for fully autonomous weapons or mass surveillance of Americans. The Pentagon is threatening to blacklist it. So Anthropic is simultaneously being pressured by the military to drop its principles and choosing on its own to drop different ones anyways. Alex Boras was right. The company said they'd hold to safety unless their competitors didn't. And now each are pointing to each other as the reason they can't.
The things that are being discussed here are having safety plans, having guardrails, things that the companies themselves voluntarily committed to in 2023 and 2024, but also said, hey, if we see our competitors escaping these systems, well, then we're going to be forced to lower our safety standards as well, because they all believe they're in a winner-take-all race. Now, that might not be how AI ends up, but it's certainly how they're acting. And so government has a role of just setting a ground floor for everyone to play by, and thereby everyone benefits from that.
The technology is getting more powerful by the week, and the guardrails are getting weaker. The companies building this are deciding right now what it can do, who it replaces, and how far it goes, and they're not asking permission. We sat down with Alex Boras for a full interview on the $125 million fight against him, why he thinks the window for AI regulation is closing, and what happens if it does. That full interview is next. Assemblyman Alex Boras, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate you taking the time. I guess, I've been covering this industry, AI, for years now from San Francisco, and I have a front row view of the opportunity, but also the risks. And it feels like this is a space that should be regulated. There's been lots of sort of battles over regulating the place, yet we don't have anything right now. How did we get here?
Well, I think we're traversing the same pathways that we did with privacy regulation for the internet, which we're still waiting on at a national level, or social media, which we still haven't seen much regulation on. Government moves slow, the federal government in particular, and states have a role as the laboratories of democracy. Sometimes they can move faster. And so that's the only real AI regulation we have is SB 53 in California and my RAISE Act in New York. But AI is moving much too quickly for the normal pace of government. We really need to speed up these conversations.
And that's really how it's always been, right? The technology moves faster than lawmakers can move. And once lawmakers figure out how to regulate something, the industry has moved on. How do you see it, especially because you have a master's in computer science, you've worked inside of the industry? How do you fix that gap when we're on the precipice and into sort of this generational technology transformation?
Well, I think you need two things. First of all, you need to actually elect people that have a background in computer science or an understanding in the technology, whether that's they were academics, they got a degree in it, whether they worked in industry, or people like me who did both. And that is going to help just with those internal member-to-member conversations. It's great to have outside experts. We need more of them. But I have found in the New York State legislature, sometimes just the private conversation you have one-on-one can really help to give someone an understanding and move them along. But the second thing you need is just to make sure that constituents are asking about it. And that's very true in AI. I mean, this feels different than the internet or even social media, which were launched with great optimism. AI could similarly bring massive, massive benefits. But I think it's maybe a third time a charm where people are saying, wait, we also know there are risks here and we want to get ahead of that. And so making sure that people are writing into their local legislator, calling into their offices and making sure that they make clear they want action here.
What are you hearing from your constituents? Are they optimistic? Are they more worried?
They're somewhere in the middle. I think there's a small subset of people that want to put the genie back in the bottle and burn all the data centers and pretend AI doesn't exist. There's a small subset represented by a super PAC called Leading the Future that wants to just let it rip and only cares about how fast AI is moving, not how many people it hurts. And then there's the vast majority of Americans that say there's a lot of potential here. Maybe they use it for things. They're simplifying their life in that way. They see the promise of medical research or other discoveries to come, but they're really worried about what it means for their utility bills, what it means for their workplace. Maybe their job has frozen hiring and their job's secure right now, but they're worried about what's coming. And they're worried about what it means for their kids, whether they're getting an education that is actually teaching them anymore. And of course, the threats that we've seen with certain chatbots and kids.
Right. How do you think that it's changed? We got ChatGPT. That was most people's first interaction with generative AI. I mean, there's still a large portion of the population that's not using these tools at the rate, people here in San Francisco are. But do you think that sentiment has changed around the technology, even in the last few months? I mean, we've been talking a lot on CNBC and here from San Francisco, just how quickly the technology has accelerated even over the last 6 weeks. Do you think sentiment is changing as well?
Absolutely. I think there was a divide for a while as to whether AI was real or whether it was just going through a normal hype cycle. And of course, there'll be cycles. They might be overhyped at some point, but people who are saying it's not real and not going to change things are diminishing very rapidly. I mean, we are seeing AI's capabilities advance at a rate unlike any technology before, both because of the massive amount of investment that's going into it and because it can speed up its own development. And therefore, every advance speeds up the rate as well. So I think the big change in policy conversations and just conversations with constituents is the people that think it's a fad and it's going to go away have really fallen to the wayside. And now we can have serious conversations about what we should do about it.
Right. And, with your background, you see firsthand how quickly it's moving. How does it change the way you're thinking about regulating it versus someone in Congress who has maybe never touched the technology?
Well, I use it every day. And so I'm quite familiar with its capabilities and also see as it changes over time and becomes more and more capable. For me, that makes sure that I want to set frameworks that can last over time, knowing that we're going to have to update them, knowing that anything that we do right now is going to be wrong because, of course, the facts on the ground will change. But you want to design things that are flexible, that are focused on giving us more information so we can make even better decisions in the future, and things that might be very cheap to do now, but would be extremely expensive in the future that we can then think about, if the worst were to come, we'd know about it. So for example, if AI is successful in replacing all jobs, which is not necessarily what it'll do, but is certainly the goal of certain people who are building it, then we're going to need universal basic income. So how will we pay for that? Well, maybe right now we should be taking options in the AI companies so that if they are wildly successful, we can actually support that. There's things like that where you can have small interventions now with big payoffs, but you have to take action now.
You think the government should have stakes in AI companies?
Maybe. I think there's some ways of funding an AI dividend that in the future are just a tax on the profits or a tax on the tokens, or there's a broad wealth tax. I know there's a specific proposal in California that has its own particular aspects. Or you could be taking just options, out of the money options on the AI companies right now that don't turn into anything unless they are wildly, wildly successful, and then taxpayers get a benefit from it.
Does that slow their progress? I mean, what the accelerationists, that camp that, wants progress at all costs, what they're worried about is that the government gets too involved, whether that be regulations or even some of the options that you're bringing up. And that actually hurts U.S. in this global race against China. What do you say to that?
I love this argument because it's very rarely done in good faith. And the example of that is you ask these people what they feel about export controls. And the vast majority of them are against it, in which case you're not really being serious about the race against China. China is regulating its AI far more than anything proposed in the Western world. I mean, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is terrified of what an LLM might say or how it might empower their populace. So regulation is not going to be the reason we lose that race. And we saw that in debating my bill, the RAISE Act, which had a provision specifically to cover knowledge distillation, which is the technique that DeepSeek used to try to catch up to ChatGPT. And Anthropic today just put out a report that DeepSeek and other Chinese companies are again using knowledge distillation to try to copy their performance. My bill would have been the first in the Western world to regulate it, but the accelerationists were the ones that lobbied so hard to take that provision out. It's an easy thing for them to say. They're actually motivated by profits.
Okay, there's a few things I want to unpack there. You think that sort of any restrictions we put on our technology into China, that's at odds with moving the U.S. along. But, what those people argue is that we should be focusing on our own innovation, focusing on moving as quickly as possible for our own American technology companies in order to compete with China. And yes, they may be regulating, I would agree with you, in some very substantial ways, but that's sort of the content of the LLMs. They're not regulating how quickly the technology can move.
Well, I think when you try to put regulations on what the LLMs will say, that necessarily is going to slow down how they can get to market and the ways they can be developed. And to be clear, the export controls, we should do them because we're worried about China catching up, but also there's a shortage of compute in the US. So every advanced chip that we sell to China is just raising the cost and making it harder for us to accelerate in the US. If you want to be a pure US accelerationist, that's the greatest reason to support export controls.
Right, but if you restrict chips, our own chips in China, they're already building their own ecosystem. The last few years that we've put export controls on American chips has actually led to a booming industry there. Huawei and other companies, a few of them have gone public with just huge fundraising. You create a homegrown system that is able to be independent of us, and then they can go out and bring that to other countries that just want chips that are good enough. They don't necessarily want to pay for the American ones. So is that the worry? What do you say about sort of the idea that the Chinese stack?
I think, yeah, I think that is a worry, and China is going to do that regardless of what the U.S. does. They originally, when we said we could sell the second most powerful chips to China, China blocked them. So yeah, China is going to work to make their own advanced chips. If they have access to a bunch of US chips and can use that to reverse engineer our processes, they're going to do it faster. If they have access to chips that allow them to make better AI, that's just going to help them reverse engineer chips and build their own faster. So yeah, I mean, to be clear, I released a 8-point plan on AI with 43 subpoints, and export controls are one of them. I don't want to say that that's the only policy to go forward, but I do think it's the one that most reveals hypocrisy among people who are just pro-accelerationist because of the race with China.
What about the idea is kind of don't look over your shoulder. If you're swimming in a pool and you look at your competitor, it's going to slow you down. What about the idea that American AI companies just need to innovate? And if the government is restricting or regulating or doing anything at home to slow that down, you're going to hurt them in that race?
Yeah, I think you need to look at the regulations that are actually being proposed and how they would impact something. I mean, putting a seatbelt on the Lamborghini doesn't really slow down the Lamborghini, but it saves lots of lives. And the things that are being discussed here are having safety plans, having guardrails, things that the companies themselves voluntarily committed to in 2023 and 2024, but also said, hey, if we see our competitors escaping these systems, well, then we're going to be forced to lower our safety standards as well, because they all believe they're in a winner-take-all race. Now, that might not be how AI ends up, but it's certainly how they're acting. And so government has a role of just setting a ground floor for everyone to play by, and thereby everyone benefits from that.
So you think there's a way of enacting regulation and safeguards on AI that does not slow the industry down?
Absolutely. In fact, some of the greatest capability investments have come out of the safety community. Reinforcement learning from human feedback came from the safety community. Chain of thought reasoning, which allows the deep research and the long timescales of work, came from the safety community. In fact, I think because the market believes it's a winner-take-all race, it overvalues short-term gains and undervalues more of that fundamental research that will allow it to be trustworthy in the long run. And so government shifting companies to focus a little bit more on safety could very well end up accelerating even more, right? My aim is not to slow down acceleration. My goal is for it to be safe, whether that means faster or not. I'm indifferent to, as long as it's developing in the right way.
Alex, I want to go back a moment. You said that you use AI in your everyday life. How do you use it?
I use it to prepare for interviews like this one and to do research on people that I'm meeting. I do it to research policy that's going forward. It's a great first draft of remarks that I can then edit from because there's something on the page instead of a blank page. We use it for naming bills. It's really good at coming up with acronyms. And sometimes just grabbing like a bunch of different research and resources together and giving me a good summary of that.
Have you experimented at all with the latest tools like Claude Code or Codex by OpenAI? And the difference there is what you described is using a chatbot. Have you used the tools that actually have AI agents act for you?
I've used Cowork as well, but I've also used Claude Code. In fact, I submitted a pull request to Claude Code for their connector to iMessage because they could have been using a faster algorithm to access contacts. And I think when they originally built that connector, they didn't build it with an elected official's contact list size in mind. So I not only have used it, I've actually edited some of the code and submitted a potential change on GitHub.
Right. Okay. What are your thoughts? I mean, to me personally, this was just such a huge amount of progress, something that I haven't seen in years since ChatGPT originally sort of arrived on the scene. And it also sort of freaked people out. I mean, the markets, what we cover day in and day out here on CNBC, every day there's a sell-off in a new industry, it feels like, because of Claude Code's capabilities. How are you seeing the sort of progress that you've been experimenting with?
I mean, it's going to be incredibly destructive. And in some ways that's presented in the economy as productive, right? Creative destruction. But it is going to change the way that almost all work is done. So yeah, I think people are going to use it. I think it's going to be much cheaper than other options that could lead to real abundance for people, or that could lead to an incredible concentration of wealth and a bunch of jobs destroyed where humans don't have the time to retrain to the next job before AI replaces that one too. I mean, these are the sorts of things that government needs to be preparing for, because we don't know which way it's going to go, but we should be doing the contingency planning right now.
Right. Now, you said that there's, two campaigns in your race that have raised millions of dollars, yours and the AI super PAC that's targeting you. Does it feel like this is a referendum on AI?
Absolutely, which is not what I would have expected before the race began, but it's what this super PAC has made it about. They've in fact been an incredible partner in raising up AI as an issue that needs to be discussed. And the fact that they've committed to spending $10 million and done it so early gets everyone in, all my neighbors, to ask, wait, what is this and why are they advocating for it? And what they see quite clearly is what we started this interview with there are three camps. There's the put the genie back in the bottle camp, which doesn't really have a candidate here. There's leading the future that says we don't care about any protections. And then there's most Americans that see the innovation but want some guardrails. That's becoming the question of this race, not only because of their direct spending, but because they've made clear they want to make an example here. That if they win this race, they're going to go to every member of Congress and say, don't you dare regulate AI, otherwise we'll spend $10 million against you. And to be clear, I think they'll do that regardless, but it's a lot less powerful if they've lost their first race.
So explain the RAISE Act to someone who's never heard of it. What does it actually require?
The RAISE Act is very similar to SB 53, but if you haven't heard of either, what it's doing is requiring the absolutely largest AI developers. Right now, it would apply to 5 companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI, Google, and Meta, and would require them to have safety plans that they make public and actually stick to, and disclose critical safety incidents, which are defined in the bill very specifically and require a imminent or actual injury or death. That is a really, really high bar and a really low standard for what's required of the companies. I think it is just the start, but it is built just like SB 53 to be a rising national standard that can apply everywhere.
Right. Now, you've said that the PAC claims to want a national framework, and we've covered this, that's so hard to get done. I think you've alluded to that as well. Do you think this is sort of a front to have no regulation at all?
Absolutely. Their national framework that they put out was basically, it said you have to disclose like the name of the model, the languages it can do, what kinds of ways it's targeted to be used, and like the terms of service. It's just like not actually a national framework. If what they wanted was a national framework, they can check out my plan, which has 43 detailed points of what to do. And the chief futurist of OpenAI even retweeted it and said this was a thoughtful plan to go forward. We could have a real conversation. If what they actually wanted was a national framework, they'd be supporting me, not spending $10 million against me.
Have you spoken to any of the folks who, are the accelerationist camp, like anyone from Andreessen Horowitz or David Sachs in the Trump administration or anyone at OpenAI?
I haven't talked to any of David Sachs or Andreessen Horowitz. I reached out to all of the co-founders of the Super PAC when they announced that they were attacking me through warm intros, and I said I'm always happy to chat. I've never met an issue that's been made worse by conversation. Only one of them took me up on it, and I'm thankful that person did. But no, it wasn't anyone from Andreessen Horowitz nor the big funder from OpenAI.
Okay, you can't say who it was?
Oh, I think that's for them to talk about, but I was appreciative of the conversation.
Was it constructive?
It was constructive, yes.
Okay.
We didn't resolve our differences, but it was a polite conversation.
Now, Alex, as we're talking about all this progress, there's also sort of some progress that is just getting off the ground. AI is now helping to build the next generation of AI. OpenAI's model was used to debug its own training. So I just wonder, are we at the point where regulation may already be too late?
Possibly. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying. I think there's a lot of important steps we can take now. But I think the reason leading the future is willing to spend so much in this election cycle is they know they only have to push it off for a few years before one of the companies gets to AGI and maybe gets to a place where they're so powerful they can't be regulated at all. This is moving very, very quickly. I still think there's a lot of great steps that we can and should take right now, but absolutely we are running out of time.
Do you think that there's a misconception in the public? Do you think that because most people are still using chatbots or becoming familiar with the technology, that there's any complacency right now? How do you expect to sort of win on this platform?
Well, we've gotten tremendous support for this platform, but I think it's a lot of what we've discussed where, it is, first of all, it's not at all at odds with wanting innovation. I really want innovation. My mom has multiple sclerosis. Autoimmune diseases are some of the toughest for modern medicine to deal with. I am incredibly excited about what AI can bring in terms of that research and the diseases that it can solve. But having that success, that innovation, sometimes actually requires trustworthy AI. The same way we were discussing Chinese AI versus American AI. And when I ask any American, would you use Chinese AI? Most people say no. Imagine you're European. Why would you use American AI?
Right,
you're going to want to know that it's been tested, been vetted, that it's aligned, that that's provable. And so if we're going to win in the global marketplace, it's going to be through trustworthy AI.
A lot of Americans are using Chinese AI. I talked to a lot of startup founders, and they want to use the cheapest, most efficient model that in many cases is good enough and is open source, and that's often Chinese.
Exactly. And so if the incentives are to have no safety whatsoever, that is where we'll be driven to.
But that doesn't mean they're unsafe, right? These are open source models. So you can essentially download them onto your own server, fine tune them. You're not sending data back to China.
Yeah, but I'm not saying sending data back to China is the only risk, right? That is a big privacy risk, but obviously what the models output and what they might help you do for potential misuse is quite a large risk.
Okay, fair enough. Now, communities across the country, they're revolting against data centers, right? They're blocking billions of dollars in projects. They're organizing, and I know your platform addresses this, but can you explain what the connection is between data centers and AI regulation?
So data centers are one of the major issues that bring people to this conversation, and it's a concern, especially near the communities where it happens, but everyone who's seeing their utility bill rise and is wondering what's contributing to it. And when they see a massive demand for electricity on the grid, that can increase it. When it's done completely off the grid, the way Elon Musk did in Tennessee, that can lead to direct pollution. And so, again, I think this is a place where you have two sides, one of which doesn't care, and the other of which wants no data centers, in which case, I mean, the modern internet would fall apart. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a new way, which is that, frankly, our grid is so old and in need of repairs, and we are so in need of getting more renewable energy on the grid. And here comes an industry that has nearly unlimited capital and people wanting to fund it, but is really short on time and is willing to pay a premium on time. And so if you were to set up the incentives where we have a long interconnection queue of what it takes to connect to the grid, and you can jump to the front of that queue and you can get expedited permitting if you're using a certain percentage renewable energy, new renewable energy that you're bringing on, and you pay for all the upgrades to the grid, you can actually have a system where this big investment leads to a cleaner grid, a greener grid, and a more reliable grid that benefits everyone. So this is, I think, a golden opportunity for a win-win-win opportunity as long as you set up the incentives correctly.
Right. So you let the tech company spend, what is it, more than $600 million in CapEx to upgrade the grid and build data centers and AI infrastructure. How do you get there? Do you just sort of clear the way? Is that less regulation? Is that more specific regulation?
It's more specific. There's part of it is permitting, and that varies state by state. Part of it is just the interconnection queue of how long it takes to hook up to the grid. And this is in fact, a difficult problem. There's a lot of startups in the Bay Area working on better modeling and reliability modeling to try to speed that up. But I think the federal government could be putting more resources into that problem to help model that connection so that we could speed up the connection onto the grid and get these data centers online, again, if they are green and if they are paying for the upgrades.
Now, you talk about a camp that you said there's three. There's one that would like to put the genie back into the bottle. How do you win those people over? How do you tell them that the genie's out and it's not going back in?
Well, I think, for practical conversations, they are part of a broad coalition. The same way that lots of people come to AI for different reasons, whether they're worried about data centers or they're worried about their kids or they're worried about the labor force or they're worried about the arms race with China. All of these people can come together to say, we want a say in AI. That's the battle line right now is, do the American people get a say or does it get determined by, 5 CEOs? That's really the debate of the 2026 election. Exactly what order we do it in and how we do it, I think, is the debate for the next Congress. But this one is just, do we get to have a say in this at all?
Right. Do you worry, Alex, that the backlash against AI could go too far? And I think that's maybe what the accelerationists worry about as well, that, legitimate concerns become an excuse to block innovation?
That is a very legitimate slippery slope argument. It could get there. It is a thing to be worried about. I think they are deeply underestimating the skill of their lobbyists. And I think the much more likely concern is that we don't get any regulation whatsoever.
How do you make sure, though, once you sort of open this up to regulation, how do you make sure that this doesn't sort of become the campaigns of others and they take it too far? With your background, you say that you believe in this technology, you're an optimist, but not everyone is going to have that attitude.
That's true, but most Americans agree with me, right? That's not to say that there won't be a bill in a certain state that goes too far. There absolutely could be, but overall, we're going to benefit if more people are trusting of the system and trusting of AI. I mean, this is like any big institution, like any massive change to the economy, some regulation can be helpful in benefiting it, right? I often use the analogy of nuclear power, and people have different thoughts on it. I tend to be supportive and think it's part of the solution. But if someone were to come and say, hey, I want nuclear power, I want to build a power plant, you'd say, great. Here's the siting. Here's where you submit your safety plan. Here's where you do all of this. And if they were to say, no regulation, otherwise China wins, you would say, let's commit you to a mental institution. Like, you are not thinking about this right. We can be very pro-innovation in AI, but still say there need to be some guardrails.
Okay, and finally, Alex, what do you think that people don't understand about this moment?
How quickly it's moving. I mean, you alluded to it, and I think maybe people that are playing with Claude Code all the time feel it. But I think people don't realize how rapidly AI capabilities have accelerated and are accelerating, and why time is absolutely of the essence to get this right.
I have the exact same view sitting here in San Francisco. How do you convince people of that? What's it going to take?
I mean, this is maybe similar to your question about how do you get the people that want to put it back in the bottle. I tell people to play with it. I say, be familiar with it. If you're its biggest critic, make sure you know what the current capabilities are and are tracking that over time. And anything that you say it's only so at right now, in 6 months, it's going to be amazing. And so I think you just get people to open it up, to play with it, to learn from it, realize where the limitations are, but also track over time as that improves. Because then we can have a realistic conversation about what's coming. Because even if you individually choose not to use it, your competitor is going to. Your boss might be going to, your kid might. We need to really understand what it is and how it's changing if we're going to have a good democratic conversation about it.
In other countries, I keep bringing it back to China, but I don't know if you saw what happened over the Lunar New Year. It was sort of model after model, marketing sort of gimmicks, red envelopes stuffed with cash given out all around sort of the AI industry. When you look at that, what do you think? Especially, how America is approaching AI.
Well, I think China is regulating AI far more than anything being proposed. It is a bit of a full circle moment for me because one of the startups that I worked at was using early versions of transformers, BERT and Laser, for those who are in the know, far before ChatGPT, to try to do anti-money laundering work for banks. And one of the things was picking out idioms in other languages and realizing that red envelope often means a bribe. So this is kind of a full circle question for me. But I think that this is of course, other countries are investing in it. Part of my plan is making sure we have international diplomacy and international agreements. Even in the height of the Cold War, we had the red phone to Moscow.
What about embracing it, though? I'm not talking about regulations. I'm talking about a whole population that, like you said, is sort of using the tools, seeing their capability. Do you think that the U.S. is doing that? Do you think they should be? We should embrace the technology along with regulation?
Yeah, ChatGPT is probably, I think, the fastest user growth of any consumer product that I'm aware of. So people are embracing it. And again, as I say, like, I am an advocate for playing with it, for understanding it. I use it all the time myself. I don't view that in contrast at all with saying, hey, we need some regulations. Like, I also drive a car, but I appreciate that there's a speed limit on the highway.
Right. And you're using Claude Cowork, so that says a lot. Assemblyman Boris, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Great insights.
Thanks for having me.